If you've watched any videos from my channel before, you've probably got the idea that I quite like cars, cameras and technology, which I do, but I'm also interested in doing some other types of videos too. So today we're going to be looking at the downsides of the news. Now don't get me wrong, it is important to be aware of what is happening in the world, but is there a dark side to the news publication companies and journalists? News companies are businesses, and businesses want to make as much money as possible. That does tend to be what most businesses want to do, but they make as much money as possible by having people buy physical copies of the newspaper, by charging people a subscription to read articles on their website, or even for the ones that have free websites, they have ads, and ads can generate quite a bit of money too. So the more people they have reading their articles, the more money they are making. These news organizations need people to be interested in the articles and to keep coming back to find out more. And how do they do this? Well, mostly by publishing negative and shocking articles. It's much easier to get a stronger emotional response with a negative article than with a positive one. To try to explain this a bit, as humans, our instinct is to survive. So therefore we want to know about anything that could harm us physically or mentally, and we want to get as much information about it as possible so we can avoid it happening to us. Terrorist attacks, wars, computers taking over, all of these things pose a threat to our survival. And this also applies to less critical things that still affect our quality of life, such as rising house prices, if there's too much pollution, traffic jams, that sort of thing. Now, I'm not trying to say that these things aren't important. Of course, all of them are. But you should be careful how much of it you worry about and how much of it you expose yourself to, because there's only so much that one person can do on their own. And there are lots of good things that happen in the world too, but they don't tend to get as much media coverage as the bad things. And here's the thing. Constantly eliciting fear, anger and sad emotions from people will start to affect them and make them think that things are worse than they actually are. If journalists can get you worried about what's happening in the world, then you're more likely to keep coming back to them to find out more information about how things are progressing and what new dangers there are to you. Now, I think part of the problem is that these news organizations don't know you. They're not specifically picking out which articles are relevant to you. They're just throwing out as many things as they can in a blanket, make everyone a bit worried approach. They're getting a whole bunch of articles about a variety of different things that will probably get a strong reaction, and then just throwing all of them at you, hoping that some of them will affect you. And also the way that the articles are written, it's a lot easier to complain about a problem rather than coming up with a solution to said problem. But there is hope. Rather than going to news organizations directly, there are now services such as Google and Apple News that go through a selection of different articles from different news sites, and based on your preferences, the kind of things you're interested in, they will pick the articles that are most relevant to you. Mix that in with a bit of general news, and every day these apps can give you a list of articles with things that you will read not because they horrify and shock you, but because you're actually interested in them. Every day these news services can give you a selection of articles that are relevant to you, rather than a bunch of horror stories. There are still some caveats. In order to make the article suggestions as relevant as possible, it does help for the service to have access to your browsing history and browsing data. And this could raise some privacy concerns depending on how the data is handled. And this assumes that articles actually exist for the things you're interested in. But these services don't just have to rely on mainstream news publications, they can also look at independent blog posts too. And with the amount of content being uploaded to the internet, it's highly likely that somewhere there's going to be some articles that are relevant to you. You just need Google or Apple News to help you find them. Maybe even artificial intelligence could write articles, which sounds really awesome and really scary. At that point, computers may be starting to take over the world. And of course, it won't be publicised because the computers are the ones controlling the news. Wonderful. There's also potential for a system like this to reduce the amount of bias you get in the articles that you read. certain newspapers usually have very strong political opinions, either left or right. Because I'm looking at the camera, that's the wrong way round. Left, right. That's very confusing, but anyway, you get my point. Of course, all this assumes that the tech companies providing this news gathering service don't have their own biases. Google. At least from my experience, Apple News does tend to offer you a bit of variety, some left-wing stuff, some right-wing stuff, and that is the best way to make up your mind about an issue, to see both sides of the problem. Now with all of this, I'm not saying you should bury your head in the sand and just ignore what is going on around you. You could start using Google or Apple News, or if you do want to read the newspapers or the mainstream news websites, try to limit how much you take on board and how much you let it affect you. I know that's easier said than done, but with a bit of practice. I don't know how this video is going to turn out. I guess we'll see if I can talk about things that don't have engines or a bunch of advanced electronics, but if this video did turn out well and you like it, then please consider leaving a like and subscribing so as not to miss any new videos. See you later.